If we take the height of Mount Everest, we would still have about a mile of water above us before we get to the ocean surface. Spend a lot of time and effort developing submarine hunting technology. 7 miles down at the lowest point on the entire planet, a camera light cuts through water that has never once seen the sun, and something drifts into the frame. It should not be there. Nothing that size, that intact, that alive, is supposed to survive where the pressure could crush steel in a heartbeat. But there it is, moving calmly across the bottom of the world. And the moment the footage reaches the surface, the people who study this place go quiet and start pulling apart everything they thought they knew. So what exactly did that camera catch down there in the dark? For hours on the bottom. I think the longest anyone's ever been on the bottom of the Challenger Deep. The descent. The year is 2019, and Victor Vescovo is sitting inside a specially built submersible beginning his descent toward Earth's deepest scar, the Mariana Trench. I need you to understand that this is not just a dive. This is like climbing into a sealed metal sphere and lowering yourself on purpose into a zone of death. At first, everything feels almost ordinary. The water outside the window is bright, the kind of blue you would see on any normal day at sea. But as the submersible sinks, the light starts to drain away. Within minutes, a thick darkness closes in so completely that you could press your own hand against the glass and not see it. There's only the low hum of the machines keeping you alive and one human being alone going down. The descent lasts nearly 4 hours. 4 hours of sinking through black water. I went through pretty much all of my electrical power and had to be swapping batteries around and circuits around. It was a great journey, and with every meter, the pressure climbs higher, building towards something the human mind cannot really picture. By the time the sub reaches the bottom, the pressure crosses over 16,000 pounds per square inch. Sit with that number for a moment, because it is not an abstraction. It means that if a single seal fails, if the engineering makes one small mistake, a human body would not be injured. It would be gone, not in minutes, in a second. And the silence does something to a person. Up on the surface, there's always some sound. Wind, waves, the creak of a hull. Down here, there is nothing but the machine and the slow, growing awareness that every meter of water above you is one more wall between you and the world you came from. There is no rescue at this depth. No team can follow you down. If something goes wrong at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, you are on your own in a way almost no human has ever been. At 35,853 feet, the sub finally settles onto the ocean floor. And this is not just a record being set. This is the exact moment humanity touches the lowest point it can reach on its own planet. And think about the kind of person who chooses this. Vescovo is not being sent down by anyone. There is no order, no rescue plan, no safety net waiting in the dark. He climbed into that sphere knowing that the deepest part of the ocean has killed almost everyone foolish enough to underestimate it. And he went anyway because he understood something most of us forget. We have mapped Mars in finer detail than the floor of our own ocean. The deepest place on Earth was still, in 2019, more of a blank than the surface of the moon. Then the lights come on and the camera starts to record a world apart. To understand why what that camera caught was so disturbing, you first have to understand the place it was filming. Because this is not a normal trench. This is a subduction zone where the Pacific tectonic plate is slowly grinding downward beneath the Mariana Plate. A process that has been pulling this wound open in the Earth's crust for millions of years. Here is the simplest way I can make you feel how deep it goes. Take Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on the planet, and drop the whole thing into this trench. Its peak, the highest point on the surface of the Earth, would still sit almost a mile underwater. You would have a full mile of ocean above the summit before you ever reach the air. That is the scale we are talking about. The pressure at the bottom is beyond 1,000 atmospheres, roughly 1,000 times the weight of the air you're sitting under right now, pressing on every inch of everything down there at once. And the cold is just as relentless, hovering barely above freezing. But the part that gets under my skin is the darkness. Sunlight gives out around 3,300 feet, and the bottom of this trench is nearly 10 times deeper than that. Great Big Bang. We didn't know what it was. We're about 20,000 feet, and we looked around and checked everything. So, think about what that actually means. For billions of years, not one ray of light has ever reached the floor of this place. It is so completely black down there that it makes no difference whether your eyes are open or closed. You would see exactly the same nothing. Where there is no light, there are no plants. Where there are no plants, nothing is making food. Whatever scraps of nourishment exist have to drift down from far above. Dead things sinking slowly through the dark, sometimes taking days to reach the bottom. Picture it. A fish dies near the surface, miles up, and its body begins a slow, silent fall, drifting down through layer after layer of darkening water, until days later, what is left of it finally touches a floor that has never once seen the sun. That is the food supply. That is the whole menu. Crushing weight, freezing cold, total blackness, and a few crumbs raining down from a world the bottom will never see. Look at that list, and the conclusion seems obvious. Nothing could live down there. Nothing should be able to. We were so sure of that we named the place after the underworld. Scientists call this layer the Hadal Zone after Hades, the ancient realm of the dead. We labeled it the land of the dead before we had ever properly looked. The old belief. For most of human history, the smartest people alive agreed completely. The deep ocean was empty. In the 1800s, when scientists first tried to drag samples up from the deep sea, their equipment kept coming back with nothing. Sometimes a little mud, sometimes cold sediment, but no proof of anything complex living down there. And every empty net only hardened the belief. The deep, they decided, was a barren zone, a dark, drowned desert with nothing in it. Then in 1960, something happened that should have shaken that idea loose. A submersible called the Bathyscaphe Trieste carried two men, Don Walsh and Jacques Picard, all the way down to Challenger Deep, the very point Vescovo would reach decades later. And they came back saying they had seen living creatures on the bottom. But the technology of the time was painfully limited. The cameras could not capture clear footage. The visibility was terrible. So what they witnessed could not be proven, and the doubts simply swallowed it. For years afterward, the scientific world held the line. Life at these depths, they maintained basically, is it a little hole? Is it a big hole? What kind of feature is it down there? There's a whole lot of questions you get when you find this one spectacular reading. A hidden city. The abundance was only the first surprise. The deeper jolt came when Jameson looked closer and saw how varied that life actually was. This was not one hardy species scraping by alone. It was many different kinds of creature living side by side, as though an entire town had quietly assembled at the bottom of the world. Even among the amphipods, there were clearly different types, some thin, some bulky, some darting fast, while others hugged the seabed. The sea cucumbers were not all alike either. Some inched along, grazing the sediment. Others moved their own way, each seeming to hold down a specific job in the system. Then came the worms and the isopods and other shapes that had barely ever been recorded this deep, all of them going about their business. And none of them were isolated. They were wired into each other. A complete food web was humming away down there in the dark. Scavengers worked the dead material drifting down. Filter feeders pulled nutrients straight from the water. Predators hunted the smaller animals around them. Every creature had a role, a place, a purpose, a system this organized, this balanced, in conditions this brutal, was something no one had been prepared to find. It wasn't survival. It was a society. And a society does not appear overnight. A food web layered like that with every niche filled takes a very long time to build. It means life did not just stumble into the trench and die. It settled there generation after generation, long enough to specialize and divide the labor and shape itself to the dark. Which raises a quiet, uncomfortable question. How long has this been going on right underneath us in the one place we never thought to check? Because if this is old, if these communities have been quietly running for thousands or even millions of years, then we are not looking at some fragile fluke clinging to the edge of existence. We are looking at one of the oldest, most stubborn experiments in survival on the planet, carried out in total secrecy. While everyone above assumed the lights were off and the rooms were empty, we were not studying a dead place that occasionally surprised us. We were ignoring a living world that had been there the whole time, wide awake. There was one last assumption still standing. Even if life was abundant, even if it was diverse, surely it would be slow, sluggish, half asleep in the cold and the dark, conserving every scrap of energy. That was the final reasonable guess. The footage tore it apart, too. The amphipods were fast. The instant food appeared, they attacked it in a mob, shoving and competing, each one racing to grab as much as it could before the rest. This was not the twitch of animals running out of time. This was the behavior of confident, hungry predators that knew exactly what they were doing. And the fish moving through the same water were swimming smoothly, easily, in full control, exactly like fish in warm, shallow water near a beach. Their bodies were not slowing down. Their lives were not winding down. They were not enduring this place. They were thriving in it. Everything scientists had assumed about deep life pointed the other way. The logic seemed airtight. Less food and brutal cold should force any organism to throttle itself down, to move as little as possible, to spend energy like a miser 1 calorie at a time. That was not a wild guess. It was sound biology, and the footage simply ignored it. These animals were behaving like they had energy to burn in a place that should have rationed every scrap of it. And that forces a strange flip in how you have to think about the whole trench. This environment is a death sentence for us. To the things that live there, it is just home. The most hostile place we know of on Earth is, to its residents, completely ordinary. Clearly, the ocean floor had enormous changes in relief, was very mountainous in some places, had great deeps in other places. Built for the dark. So how do they pull it off? How does anything live under a weight that would erase a human in a second? The answer is quieter and stranger than you would expect. Their bodies are mostly water, and water barely compresses. So the pressure inside them stays almost perfectly matched to the pressure outside. They're not bracing against the ocean. They're not holding it back. They're simply in balance with it. The same crushing force pushing in and pushing out, canceling itself. The trench cannot crush them because there is nothing rigid inside for it to crush. The real trick is smaller, down at the level of their cells. Their proteins are built to keep their shape under pressure that would warp ours. Their cell membranes hold special fats that stay flexible when they should turn stiff. Their enzymes keep working in the cold and the dark without slowing down. And here's the part that should unsettle you a little. They did not invent some alien biology to do this. They are running on the same basic machinery you and I are running on, just adjusted in a few precise places. Life does not need to become something else to conquer the impossible. It only needs to bend in the right spots, which means the line between where life can exist and where it cannot is far blurrier than we ever wanted to admit. And if biology bends this easily to fit the deepest, darkest place on Earth, it raises the obvious next question. Just how far does it bend and how big can it get? Giants and shadows. This is where the story stops being merely amazing and starts crawling under your skin. Because the creatures down there were not just plentiful and energetic. They were too big. The amphipods were reaching 6 to 8 inches long, many times the size of their relatives in the shallows. And then there was the animal that, more than anything else on that footage, deserves to be called the creature at the bottom of the ocean, the snailfish. 8 to 10 inches long with a soft, faintly translucent, jelly-like body. It drifted through the beam of the lights like something half-finished, pale and ghostly, almost glowing. You could nearly see through it. By every old rule, it should have been a flattened smear at that depth. Instead, it was whole, fully formed, fins intact, gliding through the most crushing water on the planet as calmly as a goldfish crossing a bowl. Stay on that image because it matters more than any shadow. This is not a beast with teeth. It is not a horror. It is a small, gentle, almost delicate thing. And that is exactly what makes it so unsettling. We could have braced ourselves for some armored monster built like a tank to take the pressure. Instead, the deepest fish on Earth looks fragile enough to fall apart in your hands. And yet, It lives somewhere that would crush a steel cylinder. We're not equipped to resist those kinds of pressures. And so, it's necessary to protect humans from that type of an environment. The creature that broke the rules did not look strong. It looked soft. That single, gentle, otherworldly animal filmed where nothing was ever supposed to live is the image that sent scientists back to recheck everything. But the fear does not come from what the camera clearly showed. It comes from what it could not. The lights only ever lit a small bubble of water. Beyond that edge, the dark was total. And again in the footage, the mud on the seafloor seemed to shift and stir as if something large had just moved through, though nothing clearly appeared on screen. In several shots, shapes drifted at the very rim of the light, some sliding, some vanishing the instant the camera turned toward them. A few of them large enough that they did not match anything the expedition had filmed. You watch it, and your eye keeps snapping to the corner of the frame, to that boundary where the light gives out and the black begins. Because that is where the movement always seems to be, just outside of proof. Now, I want to be honest with you, because this is exactly where these stories usually go off the rails. We don't have proof of a monster down there. We don't. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Those shifting shadows could be silt or current or tricks of a single light source in absolute black. But here's what changed. For generations, anomalies like that, odd shapes, strange sonar returns that matched no known animal, got waved away automatically because everyone knew there was nothing alive down there to make them. That excuse is gone. Now that we have watched complex, fast, oversized life thriving on that floor, the easy dismissal does not hold anymore. So look at the geometry of the problem. The lights reveal a few meters. The Mariana Trench runs more than 1,500 miles along the seabed, a canyon longer than most countries, almost entirely unvisited. The footage we have, hundreds of hours of it, amounts to a handful of pinpricks of light scattered across an enormous lightless world. Anything that wanted to stay out of the beam could do it without trying. And if 8 to 10-inch creatures live down there in comfort, then where exactly is the ceiling? 1 foot. 2. Something we have not seen at all. Remember, the amphipods down there already grow several times larger than their shallow water cousins. Something about the deep does not shrink life. In at least some cases, it seems to make it bigger. So the question is not whether that scaling has a limit. The question is where, and whether anything has ever been close enough to one of our few small lights to show us. The most frightening thought is not that we found something strange. It is the growing suspicion that we have not really seen the place yet. Woods Hole in those days was kind of a backwater. It was just right for us because we were trying to do this project sort of out of sight because we weren't too sure it was going to work. The food problem. And there's a hole in this whole picture that nobody has filled. And it might be the most unsettling part of all. If the trench is this crowded, this active, this alive, then what on earth is feeding it? No sunlight reaches the bottom. So where is all the energy coming from? The first answer was marine snow, the slow drift of dead matter falling from far above. It is a tidy idea until you run the numbers. The amount of debris that actually reaches the bottom comes nowhere close to feeding a population this large and this busy. The food coming down and the life living down there do not balance. Something is missing. Maybe chemosynthesis is quietly at work, bacteria building energy from chemicals the way they do at the hydrothermal vents. Except vents have not been found everywhere in this trench, so that cannot explain all of it. Maybe there are hidden energy sources we have simply never detected, reactions happening in the dark we know nothing about. Or maybe, and this is the one that genuinely unsettles me, the deep ocean runs more efficiently than the sunlit world above it, recycling the same scraps of energy over and over until almost nothing is wasted, sustaining far more life on far less than should be possible. If that last one is true, the place we wrote off as a dead zone may be one of the most stable, efficient ecosystems on the entire planet. But the truth is, we do not know. We are staring at a thriving, packed world in crisp 4K, and we cannot fully explain what keeps it alive. There's a major piece of how the bottom of the ocean works that is still completely missing, and we're looking right at the evidence of it without being able to name it. Our garbage found. There's one last thing the cameras found at the bottom of the world, and it is the one that should disturb us most. Because the place we believed was the most remote, untouched spot on Earth turned out to have a visitor already. Us. When Vescovo's submersible reached the very floor of Challenger Deep, the deepest point on the planet, the lights picked out a plastic bag and a candy wrapper lying in the silt. 7 miles down, in the one place we were certain no human trace could ever reach, our garbage was already waiting, having arrived long before we did. And it goes deeper than the seabed. When scientists examined the amphipods, those tough little survivors thriving in the most extreme conditions on Earth, they found microplastics inside their bodies. The pollution we pour into the surface had not just sunk to the bottom. It had worked its way inside the animals that live there. The most isolated ecosystem we know of is already carrying a piece of us inside it. Sit with the timeline of that. We did not even confirm this life existed until 2019. And by the time we finally saw it clearly, our waste was already inside it, woven into the bodies of creatures we had not so much as named. We reached the bottom of the world twice over. Once with a submarine, and long before that, without ever meaning to, with our trash. So hold the whole shape of this in your mind for a moment. For generations, we called the deep ocean dead. And we were wrong. It is alive, crowded, fast, and stranger than we guessed. We caught one pale, impossible creature drifting through water that should have destroyed it, and it sent the experts back to the start. We cannot explain what feeds that world. We have shadows at the edge of the light we cannot name. And the very first time we looked clearly, we found our own trash had beaten us there. Every single one of those facts was a surprise. Every one of them landed on people who were sure they already understood this place. That is what it actually means to recheck everything. Not to adjust one number, but to admit that the entire picture was built on an assumption that turned out to be false. The creature filmed at the bottom of the ocean made scientists recheck everything. But the harder truth is that we have barely seen this world at all. The footage we have is a single candle held up in a darkness that stretches for miles in every direction. And whatever else is down there, drifting just past the edge of the light, is still down there right now, this very second, as you sit and watch this. So, if something this alive was hiding in the one place we were sure was empty, what else have we gotten wrong? Tell me in the comments what you believe is still down there waiting in the dark. And if this changed the way you see the bottom of the ocean, even a little, subscribe and stay with the channel because we're only just getting started and the deep is a very big place.